in the Kentucky Oaks. Rachel Alexandra, a cool and calculated second.
Zenyatta coming flying on the grandstand side.
Super filly, you bet! Unbelievable!
Both horses took different roads to their perfect seasons. Zenyatta started the year receiving accolades for her undefeated 2008 campaign, establishing her as the best female in racing.
The winner is Zenyatta.
Thank you very much. It's a wonderful gift to have a filly like that.
Zenyatta would lose out to Jess Jackson's Curlin for Horse of the Year honors. Little did Jackson and the Mosses know that in the near future, they would once again be involved in a Horse of the Year debate. In Hot Springs, Arkansas, Rachel Alexandra was just preparing to show her talents, following a 2-year-old season where this robust filly finished second in a pair of graded races. On February 15th, she wouldn't disappoint. In her 3-year-old debut for trainer Hal Wiggins in the L&M Partners stable in a $50,000 stake.
Rachel Alexandra and Calvin Burrell just opening up at will. A great start to her 3-year-old campaign.
While Zenyatta continued to train under the watchful eye of John Sheriffs, Rachel Alexandra would continue to evolve, taking a pair of Grade 2 victories, which included the Fantasy Stakes.
Rachel Alexandra is giving us a spectacular performance in the Fantasy.
Next up, for both horses, would be the glaring spotlight that goes with running under the Twin Spires the day before the Kentucky Derby. Unfortunately, heavy rains and an off track would delay Zenyatta's 2009 debut, but the skies would clear and the track would dry in time for Rachel Alexandra's overpowering performance in the Kentucky Oaks.
And now Rachel Alexandra's opening up. Oh, a tour de force by the Super Filly. She's going to destroy this field. Oh, Super Filly, you bet!
The week following her monumental win at Churchill, Rachel Alexandra would be privately purchased by Jess Jackson and now be trained by Steve Asmussen. 15 days after her domination in the Oaks, she now entered the gates to the Preakness, trying to become the first filly to win this historic race in 85 years.
She's clear by 3. Mind that bird runs at her late. Here's the wire. And the filly did it!
8 days later, on the West Coast, Zenyatta would finally make her 2009 debut in an expected victory in the Milady Handicap.
Zenyatta!
Then, on June 27th, both Rachel Alexandra and Zenyatta would each race in different time zones. Rachel would yet again destroy a field in the Mother Goose.
Her march to greatness continues. Rachel Alexandra wins ease.
Back on the West Coast, Zenyatta would take the Grade 1 Vanity.
Here's the real Zen Master, and she's won 11!
The whispers of a possible showdown started, and so did the great debate.
I'm going for Zenyatta. Straight Zenyatta.
I bet Rachel Alexandra.
West Coast, East Coast, bring her on, Rachel.
On August 2nd, Rachel Alexandra would once again take on the boys in the Haskell Invitational. In order to remain perfect, she would need to defeat Belmont Stakes winner Summerbird over a sloppy track.
Here's a filly for the ages, a Haskell legend, Rachel Alexandra did it!
After Rachel's performance in the Haskell, it became apparent that Zenyatta would have to do something extraordinary to take back the spotlight for Horse of the Year. A week later, Zenyatta would be tested like never before in the Clement Turf. The racing world hoped that bumping the Beldame purse to $1 million could entice a Rachel Alexandra Zenyatta showdown, but both connections opted for different races. Rachel would take on the boys again. This time, she'd face older horses for the first time in the Woodward Stakes.
They're coming down to the finish. It's going to be desperately close. Here's the wire. Rachel won!
With Rachel finished for the season, Zenyatta would now have the opportunity to make her case for Horse of the Year.
Zenyatta, lethal heat running on at the rail, but Zenyatta with condescending ease.
Even though Zenyatta continued to win, some criticized her connections for taking a conservative path to the Breeders' Cup. But that all changed after Team Zenyatta elected to run her in North America's richest race, the $5 million Breeders' Cup Classic. For the first time, Zenyatta would take on the boys. Sheriffs and the Mosses had pushed all their chips to the middle of the table, hoping their star mare would show the world her level of greatness. Zenyatta's performance has only intensified the debate for Horse of the Year. Two once-in-a-lifetime racehorses that both ran undefeated historical campaigns, unfortunately, in the same season. Now voters must decide between Rachel Alexandra and Zenyatta for Horse of the Year.
Now we get to the fun part of the show where we get to have a little bit of discussion with me, Matt Carruthers, Christina Oliveris, and Simon Bray. And we're going to start off talking about who should be Horse of the Year. The great debate will rage on until January 18th at the Eclipse Awards when it is announced, Maddie, who will be Horse of the Year, Rachel Alexandra or Zenyatta. I guess there's a third candidate as well, but it's between these two. Talk about, I know you prefer Rachel Alexandra for the award, but make the case for Zenyatta.
Well, first of all, I can't remember a year in which a runner was campaigned better than the campaign that Zenyatta had. Lightly raced, only 5 starts during the year. I think, even though I was one at the time that thought, take on the boys, I think in hindsight now that was really smart, running against her own gender in some of the races that we had in the early to middle part of the year. I think it really helped her in the winning the Breeders' Cup Classic. So she was campaigned very well. I can't penalize her for not going out of California when the Breeders' Cup was in California at San Diego. Why would they leave Southern California with the synthetic surfaces we have here to go elsewhere when the Breeders' Cup, the race which matters most for them, was at Santa Anita? So again, she was 5 for 5 this year, perfect 14 for 14 in her career. Again, she had a Horse of the Year type of year. I just think Rachel Alexandra was a little bit better.
And we don't have points, obviously, or we don't get votes, but if you had a point system and you were grading, you two, Christina, Simon, of what you should rank in terms of who should earn Horse of the Year, where would winning the biggest race of the entire calendar year on the planet, where should that rank?
I think it goes right at the top. That's what this race was designed for, to, end year-end speculation in a situation like this. It was meant to be the deciding factor, Breeders' Cup race, whatever division, and it was really meant to decide who would get year-end honors. So I think it goes to Zenyatta.
You have to look at the field that lined up for the Breeders' Cup Classic and compare those to the fields of male horses that Rachel Alexandra beat, and I think anyone would tell you the field at the Classic was a tougher group of males.
And you know what, Matt talked about the campaign of Zenyatta. Jess Jackson, very meticulous with his campaign about Rachel Alexandra. I think the one biggest thing he did in his favor was pretty early on in the year that he wasn't going to the Classic. So people, those East Coast voters had a chance. Look, the campaign is going to be this, and if she wins the Woodward, that's our year-end goal. We're pretty much going to be Horse of the Year. I think that he was smart in saying he wasn't going to go to the Classic very, very early on.
I know you're the host of this segment. The way you asked that question, I know you're leaning towards Zenyatta. The way you asked that question, the way you asked that question.
I've not said anything.
She won the biggest race of the year by a mile.
That's not what I said. I said the biggest race of the year on the planet. It was the biggest race.
It was your inflection.
What about that, Christina, for Jess Jackson deciding not to show up on the biggest day of the year? Should that hurt Rachel Alexandra in voting?
Yes, I think it should, because as Simon mentioned, the Breeders' Cup was designed to decide the year-end championship honors. And I think Jess Jackson, truthfully, had kind of a bad taste in his mouth with regard to the synthetic surfaces when Curlin didn't win last year. I think we saw that in a lot of the ways that he spoke about the synthetic surfaces, calling them plastic, being kind of disparaging.
She won on synthetic.
About them. She did, and I'm sure they considered that. I'm sure that they looked at that. But I think what happened last year kind of clouded his judgment a little bit. I think he made the decision, as Simon said, very early on, that the Woodward would be the final race of her campaign this year, and because of the synthetic surface. That was his reasoning.